Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome Monday, October the 2nd, 2023. Of course, as always, I'm your host, Chris Phillips of the Spurs Up Show of the Daily Crow. We have got a jam-packed show, lot to get into here on this Monday. I see you all in the chat. Brendan, Austin, John Edwards, Xavier, Dave, Garrick, Travie, what's going on? Also, those in the Big Cock Club Discord, head over to the TDC Questions channel, the TDC Questions channel. We will take questions from the Discord today on today's show. But again, guys, lots to get into, breaking down everything that happened over the weekend. Bit of a therapy Monday for those in Garnet and Black. We also play a game called Monday Morning Quarterback. We'll look around, talk all things that happened in the SEC in Week 5. And we're double dipping with our guests today. We've got Jake Crain of Crain and Company. Of course, guys, it is the bye week, so no show on Friday. I'll get more into the schedule for this week a little bit later on. So Jake Crain will join us in the second hour. And in this first hour, we're switching some things around. We're actually going to go ahead and kick this show off with our good friend Chris Doering of SEC Network, talking all things SEC football. So, guys, like I mentioned, got a lot to get into. That being said, he joins us right now, as he does each and every single week, Chris Doering of SEC Network. Chris, what's going on, my friend? First things first, appreciate you being so gracious with your time, willing to shuffle some things around. It's great to chat with you once again, my friend. How's it going?
Yeah, good to catch up with you. I know the Gamecock faithful probably a little down after that game on Saturday. I predicted that you guys would go in there and get the win, and that certainly didn't happen. But a lot of other teams, 7 winners, 7 losers from the SEC this week. So plenty of company on the losing side, especially with my alma mater feeling maybe worse than the folks there in Columbia do.
Chris, we will certainly get to that game in Lexington here shortly, but let's stick with the game in Knoxville. I did not know that you picked the Gamecocks to win that football game. Just talk about what you saw. And, Chris, let me ask you this. What do you take more so away from that game, the positives for Tennessee or the negatives for South Carolina? What's the greater takeaway from that ball game for you?
Well, the reason I took South Carolina was just because of maybe more of a vote against what I hadn't seen from Tennessee, and that's the offense putting it all together. I thought that South Carolina was going to be able to stop the run and force Joe Milton to beat him throwing the football. I thought he had a good night throwing, but clearly Clayton White's defense ineffective in being able to stop the run over 200 yards on the ground for Tennessee. So the major takeaway from me was that the line of scrimmage battle was won by the Vols. Florida beat up Tennessee on both sides of the ball in Gainesville a couple weeks ago, and they paid it forward to South Carolina this week. And as far as my takeaways for the Gamecocks, issues obviously still remain on the offensive line, giving up, 6 sacks there. Not ideal. The Tennessee defensive line was able to pressure Spencer Rattler all night. The big play of the game, the pick 6 right before halftime. If you get out of that first half without, giving up the ball and a score there, it's a one-possession game, and it felt like the game kind of turned and got out of hand from that point on. So disappointing, I know, for Shane Beamer and company, but hopefully some things that they can take away. And maybe the demise of Tennessee was a bit premature, perhaps, on my end.
Chris, as you mentioned, 6 sacks for Tennessee in that football game, 238 rushing yards total for the Vols as well. South Carolina did run the football for over 100 yards, which normally in the Shane Beamer era, I think they were, Chris, 13-1, believe it or not, under Shane Beamer when they ran the ball for 100 yards or more, but it does not come true yet again in Knoxville as they fall in this game 41-20. When you look at South Carolina, Chris, do you feel like these are issues that can be fixed for the Gamecocks? Because now you go into the bye week and you've got the quarterback in Spencer Rattler. You have a great star wide receiver in Xavier Legette, but then what else? You know what I mean? And these aren't small issues. These are line of scrimmage issues on both sides. I mean, do you think it's something that Shane Beamer and company can get rectified, or is it something you think that's going to be kind of an eyesore all year?
Yeah, I think it's something they're going to have to work around. I don't know that they're going to be able to solve it in the middle of the season. I thought Dow Loggins in previous games had done a good job of being able to minimize the impact of some deficiencies on the offensive line. But South Carolina they can't afford to play from behind. They need to be able to dictate what's going on offensively, not have to drop back and throw every down. I do like the fact that they're developing a complementary run game, but I think at the end of the day, what you saw was probably a deficiency in real playmakers outside of what you said, Xavier Legette, and what Spencer Rattler has done. It's felt like in their losses this year that they were just short in terms of the personnel they need to be able to win a game like Georgia or to win a game like Saturday against Tennessee.
Now, Chris, as we keep it moving, talking the rest of the SEC, we do indeed go to Lexington, Kentucky. Now, Chris, if you would have told me that Devin Leary would have gone 9 for 19 for 69 yards, I probably would have said the Gators had a good shot to win that one. What I didn't account for was Ray Davis, 26 for 280 and 3 touchdowns. I mean, he averaged 10.8 yards per carry. That first half he had was unlike anything we had ever seen. And obviously, on the Florida perspective, an embarrassing loss for Billy Napier and the Gators. What do you take away from that one? Because we've been talking about Kentucky for a few weeks. Are they for real? Are they not? They showed they are, and Florida once again is left picking up the pieces.
Well, let's start on the Kentucky side. I think they deserve a lot of credit. I mean, this was the 3rd year in a row that Kentucky was able to beat Florida, the 4th of the last 6 years that they've played that Kentucky's been able to win. So I think in terms of establishing their place in the hierarchy in the SEC, we know that there's some room to be made up by Florida in order to get to where Kentucky is. I thought Kentucky had the better roster from top to bottom. I thought they were faster. I thought they played more physically. I thought they were better coached. So they're just all around a better team. And I picked Kentucky to be the 2nd best team in the East in the preseason. I did pick Florida to win this game. And I think I probably made a mistake that maybe you and a lot of other people made. And that's maybe taking more out of the Tennessee game, and particularly the first half of the Tennessee game, and projecting it forward, when in reality, Florida probably is more like the team we saw in Salt Lake against Utah in the opener. Still way too many penalties. First quarter, they get 39 yards of offensive yardage and give up 31 in penalties. They finished with over double-digit penalties, I think, for the ball game. Just did not look very disciplined. And defensively, I thought that was where you could hang your hat. This was the number 2 rush defense in the conference coming in. And as you mentioned, the numbers put up by not only Ray Davis, but the offense in general for Kentucky averaged almost 10 yards a carry as a team. So there's a lot of work still that remains for Billy Napier. And I think there's a lot of questions probably amongst Florida fans about whether Billy Napier can handle the head coaching and play calling duties. A lot of guys have given that up in our conference here recently. So I think that's something you're hearing a lot of Gator fans ask the question right now. But in focusing on Kentucky, I also look like I picked against the Wildcats much the same way I picked against Tennessee, and that was I hadn't seen them put it all together yet, and I still don't think we've seen them put it together. The passing game, as you talked about, the numbers aren't necessarily where they need to be. Devin Leary still continues to be a little inaccurate. Receivers dropping way too many balls. It's way too talented a group to have this many drops this season. But I think you look at it from the glass half full perspective. You're 5-0. You beat an SEC East opponent, and you're still not playing your best football. Now, they better put it together this week as they go to Athens if they hope to beat the Bulldogs. But I would say Kentucky and Missouri last year probably have played Georgia better than anybody else outside of Alabama in the last couple of seasons. So if they can get the offense to complement what they're doing defensively and seeing how vulnerable Georgia's defense looked to the run game on Saturday against Auburn, you got to feel pretty good if you're a Kentucky Wildcat fan right now.
And Chris, speaking of Georgia, excuse me, the Dogs survive a massive test at Jordan-Hare Stadium, 27-20 victors. A raucous crowd. Obviously, Carson Beck again survives and advances, and Brock Bowers just does what he does best, making big plays down the stretch there. What did you take away from the Dogs and also Hugh Freeze's program as he lays the building blocks for the future there down in the Plains?
Yeah, let's start with Auburn, man. I'm very impressed with the crowd. I think we were all kind of amazed at the Vegas line being set at 14.5 last week. Felt like Georgia was at least a 3 or 4 touchdown favorite, but I think a lot of that accounted for 2 factors. One, the home field advantage at Jordan-Hare Stadium, and 2, Auburn's defense, who continues to be really stout on that side of the ball. They're limited in what they can do on offense because of the passing game limitations at quarterback and receiver. But, I thought they did everything they needed to do to upset a number 1 team. That's create turnovers, take advantage of field position after turnovers. They were +3 in the turnover margin and scored 14 points off of those 3 turnovers. They took advantage of some timely penalties as well. But at the end of the day, the cream kind of rose to the top, and Georgia still is the best team in the conference, I think. Carson Beck kind of grew up before our eyes there in the fourth quarter, 8 of 10 throwing the football in that fourth quarter. He leads them on a 7-play, 75-yard drive in the final moments to get the win, 4 or 5 passing the football in that drive. So I think you're seeing this team grow. They're still on the offense and defensive lines not as good as what they've been the last couple of years, but I don't think that's an indictment as much as it is just commenting on how talented those lines of scrimmage players were on both sides the last 2 years. So sometimes you got to win close ones in this league, especially on the road, and Georgia found a way to get it done.
Chris, through 5 weeks, through 5 weeks, is Georgia where you expect them to be? Are they less dominant? I don't even want to say more dominant, because I think how could they be? Like, what do you make of Georgia through 5 weeks? Are they on schedule? Like, how do you view them right now?
Well, I think you can look at Kirby Smart in this post-game press conference as sounded pretty pleased, despite, maybe not being the cleanest games against South Carolina or the cleanest game this week against Auburn. I think he knows that there's a lot of new players that are having to take on bigger roles. And with that is going to come some growing pains. And right now they're going through it. They're getting better. I do have concerns, as I mentioned, about the defense. I didn't think they did a very good job of setting the edge. A lot of perimeter runs where Auburn was able to pick up, a bunch of yards. They rushed for over 200 yards on the ground. That's not something we typically see from a Georgia defense, allowing that kind of yardage. So I do think there's some improvement that needs to be made there. But like I said, man, it's tough to win here in the SEC, particularly tough to win in a place like Jordan-Hare. So if you can go on the road, find a way to win, face some adversity, and pull it out, it can help you along the way. And perhaps this was the Missouri game of 2022, where they went to Como, struggled, found a way to win, and ultimately became a better team because of it.
Chris, the SEC West feels more wide open than we can ever recall. Texas A&M takes down Arkansas. Ole Miss in a thriller beats LSU, where there was absolutely no defense played. I actually caught you on SEC Network talking about, if you're an offensive guy, that game's a lot of fun. But there's 2 defensive coordinators waking up this morning that I think are probably still having nightmares from what happened. And then Bama with a dominant win over Mississippi State. I mean, is the SEC West Alabama's for the taking yet again? It feels like this thing is changing on a week-in, week-out basis, the narrative that is, who's the top dog in that conference.
Yeah, I think we're finding things out. I think week 5 was a big week for determining, who maybe the contenders are and eliminating some of the pretenders. Florida eliminated, I think South Carolina eliminated as well. Arkansas, proving kind of who they are, that we thought they were. But I do think that, Alabama is a team that's asserting themselves. LSU out of the national championship hunt with 2 losses now. But I actually believe, Chris, in A&M. And I say it reluctantly because they've burned us in the past. Every time we want to believe in the Aggies, they seem to let us down. But I've seen some significant improvement on the defensive side. DJ Durkin's squad has gotten much better up front. I still think they have some deficiencies in the secondary, but if you can rush the quarterback, you can cover up some of those deficiencies. They've done a nice job in back-to-back games against Auburn and Arkansas, 7 sacks in each. Another 15 tackle for loss game in this one. So I think the Aggies are playing the best all around. Max Johnson came in and looked very smooth and confident from the get-go. And then you get Anaya Smith, gives you the 82-yard touchdown return. So I think in terms of complete football teams, I feel better about Texas A&M, but this one in College Station is massive coming up on Saturday night.
Chris, before we get into the full Week 6 slate, let me ask you this, because we have not mentioned the Missouri Tigers yet, which is normally how it goes in the SEC. They're kind of the afterthought. They're overlooked, but ho-hum, Mizzou takes down Vandy, and they're 5-0, and Luther Burden establishing himself as one of the best playmakers in the SEC. Brady Cook, he continues to play well. Who do you believe in more right now when it comes to SEC East contenders, Kentucky or Mizzou? I know Kentucky was your pick, but I think Mizzou's got a case right now.
Yeah, I think Mizzou has a case as well. I think the thing that's impressed me the most about them is how they continue to follow up wins with good performances. I thought the trip to Nashville was a natural letdown spot after a couple of big wins over K-State and Memphis. Going to play against the Commodores in a stadium that's usually half full and has the issues that it does this year with the construction going on was a perfect time for them to lose focus. But I thought they played really well for the most part. Defense probably needs to close out a little bit better at the end. But What about this run that Brady Cook's been on? 348 consecutive passes without an interception, judicious protection of the football for sure. And I really like, you mentioned Luther Bird. He's been outstanding, but Theo Weiss is a nice compliment. Marquise Johnson gives you the 44-yard touchdown reception as well. I really like this offense, particularly in what Brady Cook has at his disposal in terms of weapons to throw it to and hand it to with Cody Schrader and Nathaniel Pete as well. So I think this is a team that we'll continue to find out a little bit more about. You mentioned the game in Athens between Georgia and Kentucky, another big one in College Station between Alabama and A&M. Let's not forget there's a large one in Como this weekend as well with LSU traveling out there, and I think this is a real legitimizing opportunity for the Mizzou Tigers.
Chris, let's move into the Week 6 slate. Let me ask you this, because obviously you mentioned Texas A&M, Bama. It needs no explanation. It's a huge game for both sides. It's a huge game in the SEC West. Who would you say this is a bigger game for, Nick Saban or Jimbo Fisher?
I think it's a bigger game for Jimbo Fisher. I mean, they were able to get the win 2 years ago, but right now they're trying to push through that little glass ceiling that's prevented them from getting to Atlanta. Hard to believe. Missouri's been to Atlanta twice, and A&M in that same period of time has never been before. So it feels like this is the year. If they're ever going to have an opportunity, you get it done this year before Texas and Oklahoma come in while you still have the divisions. I think it's going to be much easier to get in now for some of these teams that haven't been there before than it's going to be when they get to, the divisionless play next year. But I honestly think that Jimbo Fisher has taken a little pressure off of himself. The Bobby Petrino experiment seems to be working really well. And if you listen to Jimbo Fisher in the post-game interview, he sounds very comfortable, sounds very confident in where his team is right now, and he should be. I think they're playing the best ball all around of anybody in the league.
And Chris, the team that's still in the hunt, although they lost to Alabama, is Ole Miss. Again, we mentioned had that huge win over LSU. I think now it's about, can they handle prosperity and getting that big win? It's funny, we spent a week talking about Lane Kiffin can't win the big game, and I'd call that LSU win a pretty darn big win in Oxford. But now they host the Arkansas Razorbacks, the 7:30 kickoff at home at night. I'm fascinated, Chris, in this game because of how does Ole Miss follow up that win over LSU? And also, I'm worried about Sam Pittman, man. It feels like with every loss at Arkansas, it's like the pressure just continues to mount. And Sam Pittman, lovable guy. He's got a statue of a hog in his yard. Like, he's everything Arkansas. But, Chris, as we've seen, it does not matter. Like, no coach in this league is immune to the effects of losing. I think there's a lot on the line Saturday night in Oxford.
Yeah, I think Sam Pittman's a little bit of a victim of his own success. I mean, this program was in complete shambles when he took it over from Chad Morris. And, I think they won too many games too quickly. I think the bar was elevated and it's a natural thing in the SEC here. Our fans get a little spoiled from time to time. I understand the frustration. The pass defense, not significantly better than what it was last year. Maybe the big surprise is the inability to run the football. You get Rocket Sanders back, but the offensive line still struggles, giving up way too much penetration, giving up the 7 sacks of KJ Jefferson. So I do think, particularly because Sam Pittman is an offensive line guy, his background and being one of the best offensive line coaches in this league for a long time, and that being the position that's failing them is ironic. But I do think with the portal now, you can fix problems overnight. It's not about, hey, we got to go out and recruit and develop. We can go find some guys. It's a great selling pitch to say, you can come in and help us right now, and I'm going to coach you myself as a guy that loves and has been successful coaching offensive linemen. I'm going to take you under my wing and help you get things back on track for us on the offensive line and running the football. That doesn't help you this year. Now they got to find a way to fix things this year. And I think it's a long season if you look at their schedule with what's ahead. But, this is a game that they perhaps could catch Ole Miss on a little bit of a hangover. How you mentioned earlier, how you handle success is maybe sometimes more difficult than handling defeat. This is not only a game that the players got to get up for again. The fans, that environment at Vaught Hemingway was electric. And for everybody I talked to there, it was amongst the best home field environments that they had ever been at before. And I think this year more than ever, home field advantage seems to matter more. It seems to make an impact. You guys saw it there in Neyland on Saturday night. Florida fans saw it in Commonwealth Stadium on Saturday. it is a big deal to have the home field, and Ole Miss fans need to show up and be loud again and create that same home field advantage that they had on Saturday against LSU.
And Chris, to your point, on a bit of a side note, we've talked a lot about the parity that the transfer portal and NIL has brought, but like I was sitting there Saturday watching Georgia Auburn, and it felt like we were back to the glory days of like the mid 2000s of SEC football, where, and I mean, I'm not trying to be like overly nostalgic, because I think we have a tendency to say like the good old days, everything in the past is always the good old, but like where games, it feels more competitive this year. And to your point, like home field advantage, there's so many 50-50 games where having home field, especially if you have it at night, it means everything. Like I feel like we're back to that. Do you feel that too? I mean,
I do.
Watching Georgia Auburn felt like one of those classic. I thought I was watching like Jason Campbell and David Green go to battle. You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah. It felt like one of those games.
What a remarkable turnaround too, because prior to the pandemic, all we talked about was the decline in season ticket sales, that people weren't wanting to come out to the ballparks anymore, that they enjoyed getting to watch games at home on the television from the comfort of their own couch. But I think once the pandemic struck, and not only football games were taken away from us, but the being able to gather, as crowds together in any setting, we kind of longed for that. And I think when we got back into the stadiums, everybody remembered how great it was to be a part of college football Saturdays in the SEC. So I think there's a renaissance occurring right now as it pertains to going and attending games in person. I think it's going to be even more so with Oklahoma and Texas coming next year. It's going to be an excitement about going to those two destinations. My guy Peter Burns was hosting the Longhorn Network this weekend and said that it was a perfect SEC environment there. So those folks are already ready to go. I can't say enough about, you go back even looking at the Florida game against Tennessee, 5 false start penalties in the first half. The crowds create an advantage, and they realize that they can impact the game just as the teams themselves do. And I think it's going to continue to be that way. The home field advantage this week at Kyle Field and at Sanford Stadium, I think it could go a long way to helping those home teams win.
You speak of Sanford Stadium, Chris, really quickly. Georgia, Kentucky. What does Kentucky have to do to pull off that monumental upset? Because it still would be considered a monumental upset. Obviously, Georgia back-to-back champs. They're number 1. They're undefeated, all that good stuff. And I think the biggest miracle might be that Georgia's got another night game at home. I know they love to complain about that. So 7 o'clock kick under the lights at Sanford. But as you mentioned, Kentucky has played Georgia fairly well, and it started with the physicality. Do they have the physicality, you think, this year to give the Dogs more problems?
I do think they have the physicality. I think they have the physicality on both sides. The defense has been kind of what's kept them in the last couple Georgia games, but they haven't been able to score a lot of points. I mean, they have to hit some home runs, and there were a lot of home runs hit by Kentucky on Saturday, particularly by Ray Davis, but they need that explosiveness. They're going to have to throw the ball better. You can't show up and be one-dimensional and win the game. That was Auburn's issue, was that they were primarily trying to do everything on the ground and had very little threat of the passing game. Kudos to them for still having success with Georgia, knowing that they weren't going to be able to throw the ball effectively. But I do think that they got to go in there and protect the football. You can't turn it over. You got to create some turnovers. But I think Georgia is kind of up for this task. I think they're relishing the opportunity to go in and play a physical game. Now, I think the thing to kind of keep your eye on, can they follow up a physical game against Florida with another physical performance against Georgia in back-to-back weeks? I think that's going to be something that we got to keep our eye on early.
Moving to Como, you mentioned home field. The Missouri Tigers get LSU at home. It's a noon kick, granted, but we talked a couple of weeks ago, Chris, about the opportunity to kick a door down against Kansas State, get a ranked win. That was a big win for Drinkwitz. This would be on a whole different level if you're able to take down LSU. And for LSU, man, it's about bouncing back after a really tough loss. I mean, you're already out of the national championship picture, like you mentioned. You got to stay in that SEC West. And it's only year 2 for Brian Kelly, so no big deal there. But, LSU fans, like many others in the SEC, don't have patience, especially after you tasted such great success last year. What are you most looking forward to in this game? Because, again, I just see it as another opportunity for Mizzou to prove that they're a legit contender this year.
Well, from the LSU perspective, you got to be able to put the loss behind you. Sometimes you talk about letting a team beat you twice. You don't want to let that Ole Miss game leave a hangover that leaves you susceptible to losing another ball game. I do think that Brian Kelly did a great job last year of getting them back on track after disappointing losses. But I worry about a couple of things, Chris. First and foremost, like, this team hasn't played very well on the road. Think about, earlier in the season, you lose this game, you lose in a neutral site in Orlando. You lost last year at Kyle Field. You didn't play very well against Arkansas in a 13-10 win in Fayetteville. They've got to find a way to be better on the road. And they also have to find a way to impact the game more up front defensively. For an offensive line that had struggled as much as Ole Miss has had, they had their way with the offense or the defensive front from LSU. 0 sacks in that game. We're talking about, Mason Smith being back, Mekhi Wingo, Harold Perkins Jr. wasn't able to do anything to pressure the quarterback. They got the run game going for the first time. So we knew LSU was susceptible in the secondary, but what we didn't know was just how maybe average they are up front. So they've got to find a way to be better there. They got too many good players to not impact the game more than what they did. Now, on the flip side, I think that there's a lot of confidence brewing in Como. Brady Cook is the unquestioned leader of that team, distributing the football to some very talented weapons around him. As I mentioned before, Luther Burden having a season to remember. What's he got? 4 straight 100-yard receiving games. In the first game of the year, he had 96 yards. So he's to me probably the MVP of the first month of the season here in September. But this is another opportunity and an opportunity for the home fans to make a difference. They made a difference in the K-State game. They need to show up and have an impact in this one as well.
Chris, you mentioned Luther Burden leads all Power 5 receivers through 5 weeks in receiving yards. Took that title away from Xavier Legette. Finally, Chris, before we get you out of here really quickly, it's not often that you're calling a game against Vanderbilt a revenge game, but for Florida, that is what this will be after last year. The debacle in Nashville, it's a 4 o'clock kickoff on SEC Network. You guys are carrying it. What do you want to see from Florida? I mean, this is a game, you look at the schedule, you should win. You have to win. I mean, there's no debate, banter. This is one, if you were to lose, something goes crazy. The Billy Napier chatter would really get out of hand. But most importantly, again, what do you want to see from Florida in this game in a bounce-back effort?
Yeah, I think last year, you go back and look, Florida had 2 of their biggest wins in back-to-back Saturdays over A&M and South Carolina. You got a chance to go 4-0 in the month of November. And it looks very different. And instead, they go lose in Nashville to Vandy, and then lose to Florida State. They finished 6-6. So this is a game you cannot afford to lose. If you want to show growth in your program, you can't afford to lose to Vanderbilt. You can't lose at home. I mean, you got to defend the swamp a little bit. They played better there so far this year, but they got to get back on track. They got to eliminate the self-inflicted errors. The penalties are killing them. The missed assignments are killing them. They got to be more physical on the lines of scrimmage. This is a team that they should be able to run the ball against. So get back to running the football with the effectiveness you had against Tennessee in the first half. But this is one that God forbid, you said it, if Florida loses, I mean, it really tightens up the pressure on Coach Napier for sure.
Chris Doering of SEC Network. Chris, one final thing before I get you out of here. Outside of the SEC, did anything catch your eye on this college football Saturday in regards to Week 5? I know Michigan got a dominant win over Nebraska. Southern Cal, Colorado was highly entertaining. Clemson got a much-needed win over Syracuse. Anything stand out to you or any major takeaways from the week that was in Week 5 outside of the SEC?
Yeah, I continue to be impressed with some of those Pac-12 teams. Oregon gets a big win. Washington goes to Arizona and pulls one out there, probably closer than what a lot of people expected. USC continues to score, but can they stop anybody defensively? I'm not so sure about it. But, I think that's a conference that has really recreated their resume to this point in the season and reputation. But yeah, I think Michigan asserting themselves. To me, Michigan and Georgia are kind of the same team. Haven't really played much of a schedule. Both of those teams go on the road in Week 5 and find ways to win. Michigan a little bit more with an exclamation point. But though I believe in those 2 teams. I think if I was thinking about who I would have as my number 1 team, I think the debate right now would probably be between Michigan and Georgia. And, I think that It's going to be. I think the SEC's hopes of getting a team into the college football playoffs this year, lays solely at the feet of the Georgia Bulldogs. I don't think Missouri or Kentucky can go undefeated, but I think it's going to take an undefeated SEC champion to be able to make it with how the other Power 5 conferences in Notre Dame are playing at this point.
Chris Doering, SEC Network, does a fantastic job and joins us every single Monday. Chris, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. We'll do it again next week.
Sounds good, Chris. Take care. Have a good week.
Amen. Take care, brother. Appreciate you. Great stuff, guys, from Chris Doering. It's always a pleasure to chat with him, drive around the SEC, talk SEC football, everything that took place and everything that will take place this upcoming weekend. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, it is Therapy Monday, and I'll give you all my full thoughts, reactions, breakdown. We'll discuss everything that took place over the weekend as South Carolina falls to Tennessee 41-20. All that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
That's your Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Monday, October the 2nd, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Thank you guys so much for the continued love and support. I want to say thank you as well for all of you who tuned in or checked out the A1 Air Quality Consultants post-game call-in show late Saturday night, guys. We continue to feel the love, and again, I cannot say thank you enough. We've got some schedule changes, some things happening, some things I want to discuss and update you guys on later in the show, though, because right now I want to go ahead and rip off the Band-Aid and get into it. It is Therapy Monday. The most extreme Therapy Monday, arguably to this point in the 2023 football season, as South Carolina falls to Tennessee 41-20 Saturday night in Knoxville. My top takeaways from the weekend that was under the lights at Neyland Stadium. And we'll start with this, guys, before we get to everything that took place on the field, because certainly there's a lot to discuss, a lot to break down, and a lot to banter. Maybe I'm naive, but color me surprised by the reaction on social media amongst Gamecock Nation since the clock hit 0 in Knoxville. And what I mean by that is this. The pure vitriol that I have seen, not just angst and anger and losing, not just complaints about officiating or Tennessee did this, what they did or didn't do. The commentary surrounding the future of Gamecocks football and specifically Shane Beamer. And what it shows me, guys, is this, that no coach is immune to the effects of losing. Not even a guy like Shane Beamer. You know, we talk all the time about the culture and, you know, what Shane Beamer's done at this point in his tenure. And, you know, I get asked a lot, especially over the course of the offseason, especially after the way South Carolina ended last season. And Shane Beamer at that point was a man that could do no wrong, right? Gamecock Nation would jump all over you, even at the slightest sign of you being slightly critical of South Carolina's head football coach and the program as a whole. Nobody wanted to hear anything over the offseason about, you know, discussions about the transfer portal or discussions about recruiting or discussions about the football team itself or what have you. Any type of critical analysis of Shane Beamer specifically and the job he had done to this point in assembling this team for the 2023 season, nobody wanted to hear it. And all it was fair conversation, fair criticism, what have you. Either way, that's sort of beside the point. I have just been somewhat stunned, guys. And maybe it's because of the era of college football we're in. I think that's got a lot to do with it, right? Transfer portal, NIL. We are seeing programs get turned around more quickly than they ever have been before. But the chatter since Saturday night to me, guys, and to you as well, should be this. It's a humbling reminder that winning and losing trumps all. It does not matter what culture you build. It does not matter the graduation rate of your program. It does not matter how much your players love each other, brotherhood, love above all else. None of those mantras, none of that stuff matters. None of that stuff matters. It comes down to winning and losing football games. I think, again, though, what surprised me is just this almost sense of, like, severe impatience to where after a game against Tennessee, which, guys, Now that it's happened, a game against Tennessee that South Carolina was always going to lose. We talked about it over the course of the offseason, guys, when I labeled wins, toss-ups, and losses. Yes, I put Tennessee in the toss-up category out of sheer principle because I gave Carolina a 0% chance last year to win that football game, and it blew up in my face. So I was not going to call that a for sure loss coming in the season. But I also mentioned of all the toss-up games, that one was the most likely L. And after what happened last year, Tennessee circling that game on their calendar, whether you want to call it their Super Bowl or not, what have you, the revenge factor, and then the second that game was announced as a night game at Neyland Stadium, it was done. South Carolina was never winning that football game. And some of you may not like to hear that, but that's just the truth, guys. And so when you factor that in, when you factor in the challenge that was presented to the Gamecocks, and we'll get more in the details, more in the weeds, because I understand, listen, I'm not saying don't be critical, don't have banter after a performance like that, a 3-touchdown loss to a team that you beat last year. But I'm just surprised that 5 games into year 3 of the Shane Beamer era, and I don't think it's a large portion of fans, guys. I really don't. But at this point, I feel like one is one too many. I'm just really surprised some of the commentary I'm seeing around Shane Beamer. Because when Shane Beamer was hired, guys, I viewed it as, okay, this guy's never been a head coach before. He loves South Carolina. That's a great start. It's his dream job. Great start. But he's never been a head coach. And so there's going to be growing pains top to bottom. He is learning on the job. There's going to be growing pains in recruiting. There's going to be growing pains in personnel. There's going to be growing pains in hiring coordinators, hiring position coaches. There's going to be growing pains across the board. What may have taken a coach, a veteran coach, a coach who had won before as a head coach, what may have taken him 3 to 4 years is going to probably take Shane Beamer twice as long because he's never done it before. And I understand that excuse will only last so long. That excuse is not going to live forever, especially in this day and age of college football. I get that. But I thought Shane Beamer would at least get 5 years before folks really started bringing out the pitchforks and the torches after a loss. And so the energy that we've seen, I'm not telling you that it's good. I'm not telling you that it's bad. I'm sitting here as somewhat of an indifferent observer, just looking at the reactions, looking at the commentary. And especially when you factor in, those are some of the same people that over the offseason, you couldn't say one thing, one critical thing, without getting them all worked up. Those same people are now questioning Shane Beamer as the leader of the football program. And it's surprising to me. And it just goes to show it doesn't matter how much your players love each other, how much love's in your program, or how much you think you've changed the culture or what have you. None of that off-the-field stuff matters. Because no coach is immune to what losing will do to you. People ask me all the time, Chris, is Shane Beamer a lifer at South Carolina? Does he, the way the fans, he can do no wrong. And when people ask me that, guys, I believe in Shane Beamer and the future of this football program. That loss to Tennessee does not change that, guys. I picked Carolina to lose. I knew they were going to lose. And you knew it too, and you didn't want to admit it to yourself. South Carolina was never winning that football game. Bottom line, point blank in a story. You were never walking in a Neyland and getting that win after what you did to Tennessee last year. Never. Never was it happening. And so I'm just surprised with that in mind, the energy that's coming from Gamecock Nation right now. I'm not telling you it's right or wrong or what have you. I'm just surprised. I am a bit surprised. And Gamecock Nation never fails to surprise me. But when people ask, Chris, is he a lifer at South Carolina? This is a very humbling reminder the energy from Gamecock Nation since Saturday, it's a very humbling reminder that no matter how much goodwill you've built up, no matter how much love's in the program, is Shane Beamer a lifer at South Carolina? How many games he wins will determine that. Because college football fans as a whole, they'll love you 1 minute, but it's a conditional love. It's a we love you as long as you're winning. That's what it comes down to. Wins and losses are all that matter in the business of college football and especially SEC football. Now, let's get on the field. What exactly happened on Saturday night? Guys, I strongly believe things are only going to get worse before they get better for the USC offensive line. You know, we talked about it all week long, the challenges up front, and then you heard that Ja'Kai Moore was out, and he did not travel. And so you had 2 freshmen starting on the offensive line in a hostile SEC environment against a really, really good front 7 for Tennessee. And so at that point, I knew, okay, this is an even greater challenge than we once thought it was going to be. Now, is it the right move to play these young guys? I think it is. I certainly don't want to see Sidney Fugar trotting back out there. I don't want to see some of these other veteran guys that ain't played worth a damn in their years at Carolina trot back out there. I know you don't either. But for the South Carolina offensive front, and it's so maddening because, guys, we've been talking offensive line woes for years, for decades at South Carolina, it seems. I mean, the offensive line, it seems like it's always a problem year in, year out. But you got whipped up front. I mean, you got whipped up front. Big Tree Babalade, God bless the kid. He's going to have some great nights in Garnet Black. Got his ass whipped all night. Trovon Bowe struggled as well. The entire offensive line immensely struggled. Yes, you had a 100-yard rusher in Mario Anderson. To be fair, 75 of those were on 1 carry. Outside of the 75-yard touchdown run, 9 carries for 26 yards. Less than 3 yards a carry. South Carolina, 27 for 132. Again, 75 on 1 carry. You take that 75 away, what? That's 26 for, see if I can do math really quickly, 67? No, 57. Excuse me. 57. 26 for 57 outside of that 1 long touchdown run. And why I say I think it's going to get worse before it gets better is this, guys. Think about it next year. Sure, Big Tree Babalade and Trovon Bowe will be much better because of these experiences. I think baptism by fire is the way to go. But you're going to be right back in this position with guys like Cam Pringle, Josiah Thompson, Marquis Anderson, who's not playing because of injury, guys who haven't played before, and starting youngsters up front. So I know the offensive line issues are maddening. The offensive line reverted back on Saturday night to what we saw against North Carolina. 6 sacks in that ball game for Tennessee. Outside of the 75-yard touchdown run, could not run the football yet again, less than 3 yards per carry. Help is on the way. But is there enough patience to let that help come in, develop, mature? And how much pressure does it put on guys like Alani Teasley, the offensive line coach, to develop that talent and get them ready to go? And also, by the way, on a side note, which we'll get here in a second, how is South Carolina scheming around that or scheming to help those young guys up front? More on that in a second, guys. Another big takeaway for me. Again, you blame it on the offensive line. You have to. That's where it starts. I don't put an immense amount of blame on Spencer Rattler, but Spencer Rattler's human after all, man. 24-35, 169, had the 1 interception that was extremely costly, the pick 6 right there before the half. You know, Spencer Rattler can only do so much, guys. He can only do so much. He's a human being, right? He's a quarterback. He's not a miracle worker. And at some point when you have a one-man football team, that one man just can't do it all. And it was going to take a lot more than one man to beat Tennessee in Neyland under the lights. It was going to take a lot more than one guy. I know Mario Anderson popped off with the 1 good run. I know Trey Knox had some catches late. More on that in a second. But, you know, I don't – this doesn't change, like, my perception of Spencer Rattler or how I view him. I mean, I think he did the absolute best he could with what he had available. And I think the more sickening thing is that, guys, these are going to continue to be issues more than likely. That the offensive line It's not getting fixed overnight with a pair of freshmen. And I think the thing that's somewhat sickening is that Spencer Rattler, I think we all agree, is the most talented quarterback to ever step foot on campus. And unfortunately, his career will amount to nothing more than winning 8 games in a season. It will never amount to more than that. This year, probably looking at a 6 or 7 win season with the best quarterback you've ever had playing at the highest level he's ever played at. And it still won't amount to more than that. I understand why that's a tough pill to swallow. Spencer Rattler's human. And, the fact that South Carolina is asking him to be more than that on a week-in, week-out basis, it's just tough to make a living, guys, when you have nobody else to help your quarterback, especially up front. Guys, to some of the decisions that were made on Saturday night, play calling and personnel issues. All of a sudden, this has really become an issue. It really has. I'm not sitting here calling for Dabble Loggins or Clayton White or Pete Limble, what have you, but let's just look at a couple scenarios here. Some of your 3rd and short decisions. South Carolina, by the way, guys, on 3rd and I think 4 or less, went like 1 of 6. They were abysmal in 3rd and shorts, which is where you want to get. You want to get to 3rd and short. Those are the convertible 3rd downs. Some of the decision-making that was taking place. Running Juju McDowell on a 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2 when you have Mario Anderson at your disposal. Guys, some of the 4th and short decisions. The decision to go for it after the fake punt when you could have just taken the points. Going for it on 4th and inches and not converting and not getting it. Guys, let me stop and say this. My grandfather was a great influence in my life. He's the reason I'm a Gamecock fan today. He told me one time, he said, son, if we can't get 3 feet, then we don't deserve to win. And that was in a scenario, of course, South Carolina went for it, I think, on a 4th and 1 and got stuffed. And so, with that energy, I'll say this. If you can't get a 4th and inches, if you cannot get an inch, you can't push forward and get 1 inch, you don't deserve to win the football game. South Carolina did not deserve to win the football game. When you're getting outmanned and outclassed at that level. But again, play calling was an issue, right? Dabble Loggins, I thought, had his most suspect game of his tenure thus far at South Carolina. Again, offensive line, major issue. But how are they scheming around the offensive line, guys? How are you helping out Big Tree Babalade at left tackle? Are you leaving a running back in there to chip and pick up the blitz? You did that against Mississippi State, I thought. But how are you helping out that young offensive line? So many swing passes, so many questionable decisions on 3rd and short, 4th and short. And then the personnel issues, which may be the bigger issue. It may be the bigger issue in this scenario. The usage of Dakereon Joyner at running back. The usage of Juju McDowell on those 3rd and shorts. The usage of Luke Doty at wide receiver. Guys, I'm going to say this. I am a firm believer. These coaches know what they're doing. Like this is their livelihood. Let's go ahead and clear the air on something. I don't believe that sympathy snaps are happening. I don't think coaches are playing favorites. I saw that a lot this weekend. Dakereon Joyner and Luke Doty are out there because Shane Beamer feels like he owes them something, or he's saying thank you for what they've done for Gamecock Nation. Guys, this is their livelihood. This is how these coaches pay their bills. They go out there, they watch practice, they play the best available that they believe is the best available. With that being said, do I believe that Shane Beamer, Dabble Loggins, that coaching staff is playing the 22, the 44, however? Are they putting the best product out there they believe that gives South Carolina football the best chance to win games? Yes, I firmly believe that. I don't think coaches are playing favorites or, they're giving sympathy snaps because of what veterans have done at South Carolina. I don't think that's happening. But what I will say is this. You're going to have a really tough time convincing anyone in Gamecock Nation that Luke Doty should be getting those snaps at wide receiver over Nicholas Harbor, over Tyshawn Russell, over Kyla Corton, over any of the other freshman wide receivers, especially Nick Harbor. That he's not ready thing, it's only going to last so long. People are only going to buy that for so long. God bless Luke Doty. Thank goodness he's a Gamecock, and thanks to Luke Doty for being a selfless football player. But you're going to have a really hard time if you're Shane Beamer and company continuing to say, we got to get these freshmen out there. We got to play these freshman wide receivers. Wide receiver room's an issue. We got to have some young guys step up. Well, give them a chance to step up. You're letting the offensive line learn trial by fire. You're letting them learn with live reps. Why not let Nicholas Harbor do the same? God knows you blew a bag to get him in Columbia. And if you're not careful and you don't play him some, I'm not saying this is going to happen, guys, but the transfer portal and NIL is a real thing. And so, if you want my honest opinion, I think Luke Doty's done some nice things at wide receiver. I think that's a more natural fit for him. But again, when you think about the future of the football program, when you think about the best available, forgive me, but I'd argue that a Nicholas Harbor who does not know what he's doing is still far superior than a Luke Doty who played wide receiver in high school at Myrtle Beach. Like, who gives a damn, bro? He don't run a 10-2 100-yard dash. He's not 6'5", 250. You're going to have a hard time convincing this fan base on a week-in, week-out basis that Luke Doty is a better option at wide receiver and is better in personnel than Nick Harbor is. Flat out, point blank, in a story, especially when you keep saying on a weekly basis that young guys got to play, freshman wide receiver. Well, put them out there. It's your call. It's your call. Get them out there. Sticking with wide receivers, guys, as I mentioned, another playmaker's got to step up outside of Xavier Legette, man. At some point, again, defenses are going to key in. You play good defensive line. Spencer Rattler's going to be under pressure. There's got to be somebody else to look at, right? Got to be somebody else to look at. Xavier Legette, 5 for 50, but they're going to take him away. He's not going to, he's not going to be 200 yards a week. He's not going to be 150 every week. There's got to be, who's wide receiver 2 now? Amarian Brown, 2 for 47. Omega Blake, 2 for 20. Those guys do some nice things here and there, but somebody has to emerge as a true big-time playmaker. And my goodness, how much this football team is missing Juice Wells right now. Speaking of that, guys, I will say this on a positive. I think Trey Knox is emerging into a nice weapon at the tight end spot. Another good game for Trey Knox. Led the team in receiving. Granted, it was toward the end of the game, 7 for 51. But he needs to continue to come on, man. I mean, South Carolina just has not really gotten what they thought they were going to get out of the tight end position. Joshua Simon, 2 catches for 11 yards in that game, but he hasn't been the big-time playmaker, explosive like people thought he was going to be. That tight end position needs to come along. That tight end position needs to grow and grow quickly because you're still searching for answers at wide receiver. If you don't get Juice Wells back, you got some athletes in that tight end room that I think need to become more of a part of this offense moving forward. Switching sides of the football, guys, going to the defensive side. For just a moment, I'm going to jump on this side of the fence. That's the side of the fence that's defending Clayton White. Now, I'm going to go back to the other side here in just a second. But let's look at this game against Tennessee. 41-20 the final. Guys, here's my thing about this game. You have a pick 6, right? So really your defense gives up 34 points. I literally said last week, I was asked, Chris, what's the number of points South Carolina has to score to win this football game in Knoxville? I said 35. And wouldn't you know it? That game was always going to be a shootout, guys. It was always going to be a shootout. Did South Carolina play great defensively? Absolutely not. We're going to get into it. Trust me. But with all this energy towards Clayton White, and I'm not sitting here after 5 weeks calling for his job yet. I'm not doing that right now because I look at that game. That was always going to be an offensive game. That was always going to be a shootout. Guys, it's the new SEC. Look at Ole Miss LSU. Sometimes you got to drop a 50 bomb, a 50 burger to win. It's the nature of the beast, guys. And so we're going to have a real conversation and real discussion about Clayton White as we get closer to the season when the dust settles. But I did not leave that game in Knoxville saying, you know what, Clayton White, he's a bum. That's the reason Carolina lost. I mean, guys, you had to score mid to upper 30s to have a chance to win that football game, and you couldn't do it. That's why you lost the football game. That's why you lost. On the flip side, I will say this, jumping back to the other side of the fence, right? With that being said, if you're a Clayton White defender right now, the thing going against you more than anything is that the numbers are what they are right now. The numbers are what they are, man. South Carolina still continues to rank at the bottom of the league in every major defensive statistical category. Every single one of them, guys. Every single one of them. And then you look at what Tennessee did. You know, you came in that game. You knew you had to make Joe Milton uncomfortable. And, hey, you got 2 picks off him. The thing is, like, you sold out against Mississippi State to take away the run game, take away Woody Marks, and make the quarterback beat you. Why didn't you do it here? Like, I think Tennessee is better than Mississippi State in the trenches for sure. But, I mean, 238 rushing yards, guys. Jalen Wright, 16 for 123. Jabari Small, 11 for 59. Dylan Sampson, 9 for 49. Each of those 3 guys with the touchdown. Death, taxes, and South Carolina football not being able to stop the run. And when your leading tacklers are Jelon Kilgore and Nick Emanwari and DQ Smith, you got some problems. Because that's your last line of defense that's making these tackles. So that means they're getting to that level. They're getting to that level either without being touched or without being brought down. Not a good sign for your defense. But the numbers, even if you're an adamant Clayton White defender, like, you can't fight those numbers. Because guess what? At the end of the day, Shane Beamer might go out there and say, hey, we're 2-3. We don't feel like we're 2-3. Well, you are. Well, you know, I feel like the defense is keeping them some games, and they're not that bad. They are. They are that bad. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. Wrap your head around this defense stinks. It's one of the worst in the SEC. South Carolina might win 7 or 8 games this year still, but they're going to have to overcome having a porous, crappy defense. That's it. The defense stinks. And so that's why right now, like, I'm not sitting here through 5 weeks calling for Clayton White's head. I'm not doing that. I'm not ready to do that. I'd much rather us discuss those things toward end of season. Listen, guys, I've been the fire the coach guy. I know what it's like. I know what it feels like. I have no problem calling it for what it is. Think of last year. We did this with Marcus Satterfield. I've called for a head coach's job. Trust me, I have no issue in doing so. With that being said, just because I'm not doing it, I'm not going to come at anybody that wants to say fire Clayton White. Because look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. If it's not one thing, it's another thing. Year 3. Year 3, man. Year 3. You still can't stop the run. Year 3. Year 3. You still can't get somebody off the field on 3rd down. Year 3. Year 3, you're still considered one of the worst defenses in the conference. In year 3. Year 3. And maybe the most damning thing of all, you lost all that experience on defense, right? You lost your top two corners. You lost Jordan Burch. You lost Gilbert Edmond. You lost Zach Pickens. And who'd you go get in the portal to replace him? Jerron Willis, who ain't played. Drew Tuizama from UAB, who joined the team a week before the season started. And JT Gear, who can't seem to get healthy. Who else did you add? Anybody? Did you add any corners? Did you add any DBs? Did you add any impact players on defense? The answer is no. No, you did not. It is more so about Jimmys and Joes and X's and O's, but when the people calling the X's and O's can't go out and get the Jimmys and Joes, that's when you got a problem. Guys, I just mentioned, you got to find some dudes in the trenches, man. It's recruiting. It's transfer portal. I mean, you got to get some dudes in the trenches. Right now, like the guys you have, there's going to be flashes for sure. You know, I thought TJ Sanders going down in that game, Shane Beamer mentioned, was a big turning point, no doubt. But you just don't have the bodies up front. Both sides, but certainly defensively. You're still weak and porous at linebacker. For some reason, Grayson Pup Howard, I don't know if he really played in that football game or not. I want to say he did. Yes, he did. Okay, 3 tackles in the football game. Not much of an impact. You just got to continue to stack dudes. You got to continue to stack dudes. And, you know, we talked about, by the way, play calling personnel. Let's not leave Clayton White out, guys. It's suspect. It's suspect to say the least, right? Coming out of halftime, you know you got to get a stop. Tennessee just runs it right down your throat. No adjustment made whatsoever. And if there was an adjustment made, it wasn't a very good one. Got to get some dudes. Speaking of dudes, Jelon Kilgore, a future star. For sure. The interception he had, he was our MVP of the football game. 15 tackles, guys. The way he's playing as a true freshman, had some great one-on-one tackles in space. I thought, man, that kid, again, he's going to be one of the – I think he's probably going to be the next great defensive back at South Carolina. Guys, Beamer ball, finally emerging on a fake punt. Love to see it. The pass from Kai Kroger to Xavier Legette. It's unfortunate you couldn't capitalize on it, but that was a bright spot in the game. I think you're going to see something you're going to see South Carolina continue to utilize, especially. I mean, it's going to have to probably be one of those things that you got to steal points, not just steal first down, steal points as well. And, you know, I think Beamer ball has to continue to be really good. Guys, I'll just say this on Therapy Monday, and cover your ears if you don't like to hear it, but so be it. Tennessee has once again passed South Carolina as a football program. We talked about the impact of this football game, how South Carolina, if they could go into Knoxville, win this game, it was going to, you know, kind of signify a changing of the guard or the SEC East hierarchy, and that's why that's such a pivotal game. Tennessee's ahead of South Carolina. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no really debate. There's no debate, right? You can talk about the history of Tennessee since 2000, and they haven't been good in my lifetime. Well, they're still Tennessee football. They're still one of the winningest college football programs in history, and they still have a national title. They've still won SEC titles. They still have great history and tradition, and now they've beaten you 2 out of 3. And guys, we've talked about before that for South Carolina to pass Tennessee as a program, South Carolina has to do 2 or 3x what Tennessee has to do, because Tennessee's already got history and tradition going for them. They've already got brand going for them. They got all those things South Carolina does not have going for them. So South Carolina has to do 2 or 3x to get the credit that Tennessee gets just for doing the norm at baseline. It's unfortunate these two teams won't meet moving forward, but Tennessee football back ahead of South Carolina. That's bottom line, point blank. It's not even up for debate. Final thing, guys, and my question is this. Will this fan base, I leave from this game asking this question, certainly not throwing a shot at the fan base. I just wonder, will this fan base give Shane Beamer the time he needs to build this football program? And because of transfer portal, NIL, the clock has now been sped up on coaches. I mean, should he get as much time? I guess that's a good question too, because, guys, I'll admit to you, when Shane Beamer was hired, I said, hey, Gamecock Nation should lock in for a decade. As long as Shane Beamer's making bowl games, let him build. You roll the dice and give it a shot. You need to see it through, good, bad, or indifferent. I don't think he's getting 10 years, guys. And I tell you right now, and nobody wants to have this conversation. I'm not saying we should start firing this conversation up, but based off the reaction I've seen from Gamecock Nation since Saturday, if we're in year 5, if we're 2 years from today, and South Carolina's still fighting to get to 6-6, 7-5, there's going to be some real pressure to make a change. Like Gamecock fans are tired of winning 7 games, man. I mean, you can see it. You can see it. Gamecock Nation is fed up. And so I just wonder, though, again, Tennessee got their program turned around like that. That whole conversation, that whole debate, some of you didn't like that either. Well, guess what? It's the truth. What's happened in Tennessee for Josh Heupel that hadn't happened at South Carolina? It's so funny, guys. I listed the coaching advantage to Tennessee. Oh, my goodness. People just were up and up. Had a guy on Inside the Gamecocks. Have Chris explain how Tennessee has the coaching advantage. Can you have him explain, like, how dare you say? And then in game, you got people saying, God, Shane Beamer, your coaching staff, y'all stink. Josh Heupel, this. I'm like, that's interesting, isn't it? Isn't that interesting? Anyways, Tennessee was able to turn around their program in 2 to 3 years. Guys, it takes 2 or 3x time to do that at South Carolina because it's exponentially harder. It is. Point blank, bottom line. We know that. It's harder. It's harder. It's harder to do. Harder to build a program at South Carolina than many other schools. It is. It is. And it takes time. It takes time to get guys in the trenches. It takes time to get guys. But with transfer portal, NIL, rosters being flipped overnight, there's been some questioning. Is Shane Beamer willing to do the dirty work? Is Shane Beamer willing to be dirty? Bend the rules a little bit? I don't know if he is. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know, man. But he'll have to be. He'll have to be because he's not going to get as much time as I thought he once was. I really thought this fan base was buckled in and going to be patient and locked in for the long haul. I don't see it, man. I don't see it. I think if we're in year 5 having this same conversation, if we're in year 5 seeing the same thing, I think it's going to be ugly. Will this fan base give Shane Beamer the time he needs to build this football program? Results like Saturday night are not going to help. Guys, that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the break. On the other side, I want to get into Monday Morning Quarterback, talking all things that happened in the SEC over the weekend. And then we've got Jake Crain of Crain and Company upcoming at 1:35 to talk all things SEC, Gamecocks, everything in between. All that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars. And there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also brought to you by our friends over at A1 Air Quality Consultants. Headaches, coughing, running nose while in the office or just in your home, call A1 Air Quality Consultants to have your air checked today. From Columbia to Asheville, Anderson to Charlotte, they are your breath of fresh air for all of your air quality needs. Be sure to give them a call or shoot them a text today at 864-619-2092. That's 864-619-2092. You can also contact them via email at a1airqualityconsultants@gmail.com. Be sure to check them out. We thank A1 Air Quality Consultants for their love and support of the Spurs Up Show, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
Ladies and gents, boys and girls, we are back here on this Monday, October the 2nd, 2023. Guys, appreciate you all tuning in. During the week, if you want to leave us questions, you can do so. Super chats on YouTube, as well as questions in the Big Cock Club Discord, the TDC questions channel. Our good friend Brendan M. says, Tennessee fans are still dirty, low down, and some snitches. Greg Bedinger said this earlier. People with no patience with Beamer are just low IQ sports fans. Now losing Birch, Lloyd, and Bell is worth a conversation. Lloyd and Bell knew the O-line was going to be bad and went for the money and better teams. Can't say I blame them now. Okay. Also, guys, in case you missed it, South Carolina, Florida is indeed a 3:30 kickoff at Williams-Brice Stadium on the SEC network. So a day game, believe it or not, it will be 3:30 p.m. Eastern on SEC network in 2 weeks. And Gamecocks football has already announced a sellout at Williams-Brice Stadium. Guys, that being said, let's play a game I like to call Monday Morning Quarterback. Like I mentioned, we got Jake Crain upcoming in about 15 minutes or so. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Our drive around the SEC, Monday Morning Quarterback, as we talk all things that happened in Week 5 of the SEC. We start in Lexington, Kentucky. And my goodness, what a statement made by Ray Davis and that Kentucky rushing attack. 26 carries for 280 yards and 3 touchdowns, 10.8 yards per carry. I mean, we talked a lot about the physicality guys at Kentucky and getting back to running the football and the big blue wall and Mark Stoops and the characteristics of his teams. This looked like a Kentucky football team. This looked like a Kentucky win, like the Kentucky of old we've seen under Mark Stoops. I mean, they jumped all over Florida up 23-7 at halftime, kept the foot on the gas pedal. Florida with some spurts here and there, but nothing really to withstand what Kentucky was able to do offensively, especially on the ground. I mean, guys, Ray Davis, the majority of his 280 yards, they came in the first half. And I said it over the summer, Kentucky was the team I was buying stock in at SEC days. I felt like was the second best team, or could be, I should say, the second best team in the SEC East. I think you're seeing reasons why. Now, the big question for them is, can Devin Leary get back to, or can Devin Leary get to the form they expected him to be? 9 for 19, 69 yards, a touchdown. What's crazy is they're winning despite that, right? Sitting at 5-0. I mean, a really impressive showing. Kentucky was my pick against Florida, but I did not see it being a blowout, dominant performance like what UK did against the Gators. And for the Gators, guys, it's just picking up the pieces, man. I mean, you almost look now, was that Tennessee game just a one-off under the lights at the Swamp where, you had the hex over Tennessee and they hadn't beat you there in 20 years, what have you? Was that just a one-off for Florida? It's like the pressure continues to get turned back up on Billy Napier. You beat Tennessee and you're like, okay, I can take a breath. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, it's back to, okay, is Billy Napier the guy or is he not, right? It's just, Florida questions and issues up front. I mean, guys, we talked about how important the running game was for them going in this football game. 10 carries for 42 yards for Montreal Johnson, 11 for 29 for Trevor Etienne. Florida's got real issues in the trenches, right? And something we'll talk a lot more about next week, of course, as we break down Gamecocks and Gators at Williams-Brice Stadium. But they've got real issues in the trenches as well. It's a makeshift offensive line. Ricky Pearsall, 3 for 62, leading the Gators on the outside. They've got some weapons, I think, on that offense. And, Graham Mertz isn't anything special, but I think he's good enough as a game manager to make the offense work. 25 for 30, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. But similar to other teams, the Gators just have problems up front. And when they can't run the football and they can't get that rushing attack going bounce, they really have no chance because Graham Mertz is not going to be able to do it by himself. What really surprised me, guys, was this Florida defense that we talked about a lot last week, leading the SEC in the numbers, and Austin Armstrong's unit. They've been so great. They've stymied everyone. I mean, the way Kentucky just ran through them, really surprising to see, in a major statement for Kentucky heading into a huge game in Athens against Georgia this weekend. Texas A&M takes down Arkansas 34-22, the final score. Poor Sam Pittman, man. I feel like with each loss that mounts, the pressure just continues to get turned up on Sam Pittman. Because you think about what he did in year 2, winning 9 games. Then last year in year 3, they go 6-6. Now it's year 4, guys. And now you've lost, 3 games in a row? Right? The loss to BYU was the really damning one. You lose to LSU in heartbreaking fashion. Now this game texts him, hey, Arkansas fans would rather this game never be played again. I mean, that game in Arlington and Jerry World, bad things happen to Arkansas when that happens. And they've never won. They've never won the game. Max Johnson, guys, I thought just played like a savvy old vet, was very efficient. He did have the 1 interception, but 17 for 28, 210, and 2 touchdowns. When you watch him, it's just, this is a guy that, again, he's not flashy, going to blow you away, but he just plays solid football, man. There's nothing he hasn't seen. There's nothing he hasn't done in a college football game at the quarterback position. He's going to go out there and make good decisions and give your football team a good chance to win. Guys, how about KJ Jefferson? Just 9 for 17, 132, a touchdown and a pick in this game. And they couldn't run the ball. I mean, 11 for 30 yards for Rocket Sanders. What is going on with the Arkansas rushing attack? Why can they not run the football? KJ Jefferson, 18 for -3. I mean, that offensive line, guys, was abysmal for Arkansas. And then you look at the Texas A&M side. Moss, 17 for 107, 6.3 yards per carry. Max Johnson, 9 for 57, 6.3 yards per carry. I mean, it just goes without saying, guys, the productivity of the Texas A&M rushing attack and the lack thereof for Arkansas. I really hate what I'm seeing for Sam Pittman. And on the flip side, Jimbo Fisher, the Aggies, building momentum. All of a sudden, is Texas A&M, should we consider them back in the SEC West race? Georgia and Auburn on the Plains. Guys, what a game this was, man. What a game this was. This reminded me of growing up as a kid, watching the CBS game of the week, and it just felt like every week it was a really close, competitive SEC football game. Like every week it felt like this really, truly, guys, I'm not trying to be overly nostalgic and say like, man, I sure do miss the good old days because, things are great as they are. But like the parity that we're seeing in college football, guys, like these close games, these games coming down to the wire, home field advantage meaning so much. It's good for college football, man. It really is. And Auburn almost had him, man. Auburn almost had him, 27-20. Georgia escapes on the Plains. And I know many of you are going to want to stop and say, man, Georgia's no good. They stink. Georgia shouldn't be number one. Guys, to win a national championship, if you're going to win a national title, you have to win a game like this. You have to win a game in which the odds are stacked against you. You're on the road. You're in a hostile environment. And you got to be able to overcome it. And I think the best thing from the Georgia perspective you can say about this football game is a guy like Carson Beck grew up before your very eyes. A guy like Carson Beck, that entire football team, took a step forward in regard to their maturity, their maturation, and becoming what Dogs fans are hoping is the third straight national championship football team. That was a step forward for Georgia. That was a step forward for Carson Beck. You got to weather the storm and overcome adversity in a rivalry game on the road. And give credit to Auburn, by the way, guys. Give credit to Auburn. They're still not getting a lot from the quarterback position, and they're overcoming it, right? They're able to win despite it, using Peyton Thorne in the ground game, using Jarquez Hunter, using Robbie Ashford in the red zone, a really, really tough defense, but then Brock Bowers happened. Not just the best tight end guys in college football, I would say probably the best college football player, Brock Bowers. And if there's ever a year for this guy to win the Heisman Trophy, it might be this year. I mean, he was insane, guys. 8 for 157, a touchdown. But that doesn't even speak to like those clutch catches he had down the stretch. Insane, man. Insane. So Auburn still got some things to work through, guys. That was a really good sign for, and I would say this, Hugh Freeze and Auburn, this is the worst they're going to be. The way they're recruiting, the dudes they have lined up, the dudes they're inevitably going to get in there. I mean, wait till Hugh Freeze gets his quarterback, guys. They're going to wreak some havoc in the SEC West, but hey, a test passed for Georgia. They got to make improvements, no doubt, but I thought that was a great sign for the Dogs. Carson Beck growing up in front of our very eyes. And again, guys, to win a national championship, you got to win a game like that. You got to be able to go on the road and face adversity and win despite it. Mizzou taking down Vandy 38-21. I mean, guys, Missouri, a team we're just simply not talking about. We're just, for whatever reason, we're not talking about the Missouri Tigers enough. Are they the second best team in the SEC? The SEC East, I should say. Not the SEC, but the SEC East as a whole. Are they the second best team in the Eastern Division, right behind Georgia? I think they've got a case. You could argue their resume is better than what Kentucky has put together. You could argue that. And the combination of Brady Cook, Luther Burden, that rushing attack with Nathaniel Pete, Cody Schrader, that defense as well. You like what you're seeing. A huge opportunity for them this weekend to prove that. They sit 5-0 now, though, and Vandy just left picking up the pieces, man. It's going to be really, really tough for Vandy to sniff bowl eligibility this season. Guys, moving to Oxford, Ole Miss, LSU, maybe the game of the weekend. I mean, defense just completely optional. What a fail on the LSU side. When you got the talent they have, and I know secondary was a question mark, guys, but when you got the talent they have to be as bad as they were in the fundamentals in tackling, just tackling, and you got Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo and Harold Perkins, and you can't get to the quarterback, you can't disrupt Jackson Dart at all, I mean, what is there to say about LSU's defense? On the flip side, though, Ole Miss, what a win for Lane Kiffin and company, man. After a week of hearing they can't win the big game, dropping the ball at Alabama. Ole Miss ain't out this thing yet, man. Ole Miss is not out of the SEC West race yet. Jackson Dart, obviously incredible in the football game. The offensive explosion at Vaught Hemingway, huge. And the SEC West, guys, just continues to be so difficult to figure out because even after the loss, like I mentioned, Ole Miss is in it. LSU now out of the national championship hunt, but they're still in the SEC West race even after a really, really tough loss. And, guys, you look at these statistics. I mean, Jaden Daniels, 27 to 36, 414, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Jackson Dart, 26 to 39, 389, 4 touchdowns, no picks. It was an incredible offensive shootout, the true definition of an offensive shootout in Oxford. Logan Diggs, I think they're getting the running game going, 19 for 101 for 2 touchdowns. But, I mean, just LSU guys. I mean, Quinshon Judkins breaking out, 177 and a touchdown. We talked about he'd have to if the Rebels were going to start clicking. But where is the LSU front seven? Where is the LSU front seven? They almost had 2 100-yard rushers. Bentley the fourth, 9 for 90, 10 yards a carry. Jackson Dart, 7 for 50. LSU defensively, they got to get that figured out. They got to get that fixed. And finally, guys, Alabama goes on the road to Starkville, and they dispose of Mississippi State with ease, 40-17. The Crimson Tide get the job done, guys. This game was 31-10 at halftime. Halftime. Jalen Milroe, 10 of 12, 164 yards. He didn't have to do a lot, guys. He didn't have to do a lot. Also ran on the ground 11 for 69, 2 touchdowns. The rushing attack, 15 for 63 and a touchdown for McClellan. Williams, 10 for 44. Just a total beatdown by the Alabama Crimson Tide. Will Rogers, returned to the form that we had seen him, guys, 15 to 27, 107, 1 touchdown and 3 picks. So, and this is a game, guys, where, weird things happen in Starkville, but Alabama has just dominated that series against Mississippi State, especially in Starkville. So, and all of a sudden, guys, Bama finding their footing, back-to-back SEC wins. The SEC West and that SEC West race is as wide open as we've ever seen it before because you can make a case. Bama, A&M, Ole Miss, and heck, even LSU still finds themselves in it. Going to be a lot of fun to see how that unfolds the rest of the way out. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump right into it with our guy. He joins us every single Friday normally, but of course with the changes to schedule this week, which I haven't even updated you guys, there will be no TDC on Friday or Thursday or Wednesday. We're just going Monday, Tuesday this week, but I wanted to make sure we got our guy, Jake Crain of Crain and Company, in here to talk all things Gamecocks, SEC, and everything in between. That being said, he joins us on a Monday. Jake Crain of Crain and Company. Jake, what's going on, my friend? Appreciate you being gracious with your time. Thank you for being flexible, and looking forward to chatting with you here on this Monday, man. What's going on?
Oh, dude, of course. I'm always down to come on. It's amazing, man. I'm sitting here. We're already past week 5 of college football. It's amazing how fast it goes. I wish it'd kind of slow down a little bit. But look, week 6 is going to be here before you know it.
Indeed. And Jake, what a week 5 it was in the SEC. Let's start with what happened in Knoxville. South Carolina falls to Tennessee 41-20 in a game that, Jake, I think if Gamecock fans are honest with themselves, you could see that coming from a mile away. In regards to, and maybe revenge factor gets overplayed or overhyped, but the second that game was announced at night at Neyland Stadium, you knew it was going to be a really tall task. That was the game that had been circled for Tennessee all offseason long. And then you come to find out Ja'Kai Moore, one of your veteran offensive linemen, out for the football game, starting 2 true freshmen on the offensive line. Jake, that's when I knew that, if there was ever a shot for Carolina to go in there and do it, it was probably killed with that news. Your thoughts on the game, what you took away from both respective sides in a pretty convincing win for Tennessee on Saturday night?
Yeah, look, I thought Joe Milton was good. I didn't think he was great. It's the same story with South Carolina right now. Just look at the numbers. And sometimes the numbers don't tell the story Look at where you guys are in passing and look at everything else. It's what are you like, fourth? Something like third or fourth somewhere
like
in
8.
passing?
Yeah.
Like
8,
overall,
like that.
in passing
Mhm.
yards per game in the conference, but everything else, rushing, sacks allowed, and it affects your overall offense. But you're in the bottom of the conference. Look, it's the same thing, and I hate to beat a dead horse over and over and over and over. I know this. Y'all know this. The coaching staff knows this. If Spencer Rattler and Leggett and a mixture of Trey Knox do not just ball out in every game by a million miles, South Carolina is going to struggle because you cannot win if you cannot run the ball and you can't stop the run. Tennessee was able to do both. And Spencer did. Look, I know it wasn't Spencer's best game, but eventually, like being one-dimensional the whole game, you can only witchcraft and wizardry. There's my early Harry Potter reference to get out of the way. Your way out of it enough. And that's how it's going to be. Look, good enough to beat Florida. South Carolina can beat Florida, and that game's at home. But it's going to be tough to win these games against high-power opponents if you cannot run the ball and you cannot stop the run. Because guess what? South Carolina isn't sneaking up on anybody anymore. After what happened at the end of last year, South Carolina's not going to sneak up on Clemson. They're not going to sneak up on anybody. You have some people that, and I think Spencer was right. Tennessee treated this like their Super Bowl. Hell, they had fans with their pants at their ankles. I mean, I thought this was America. Like it just, man, I hate it for Spencer. Like I do. It's like Jonah Hill on the dance floor in Superbad doing the dice move. It's all they got. It's all they got. And I tell you, the fake punt was nasty though. That Shane dug deep in. You just hate to use that and lose, right? You hate to use that one because now it's on tape. Can't use it for like another 2 or 3 years. Throw it back in the box of toys you get at the dentist's office when you get done when you're a kid, or in my case, a 34-year-old. But nah, man, it's just the same old story.
Jake, on a side note, do you feel like there's a greater number of teams in the SEC that have offensive line issues than we're used to? Because I feel like there's a lot of teams I look at that, you look at their main problem, and on a week-in, week-out basis, the team that wins the line of scrimmage, that's normally the team that wins the football game. We get that. But, I feel like there's a lot of SEC fan bases right now that are moaning and groaning about their offensive line. Have you noticed that? And if you have, why do you think that is? Why is offensive line play not where maybe we've seen it at before?
Well, look, I think, it's kind of goes to the anomaly of having to have a bunch of new quarterbacks, right, starting in the league. You have some places that had to replace a lot of offensive linemen. You had some places that didn't. I tell you one thing that, and I'm not 100% sure, Chris, but the more I watch it early in the year, I think not letting them hit in preseason's having a big effect. I think the lack of physicality we have now, because defensively, that's a mindset, right? Defensively, you go to practice, hit. Not that offensive linemen, I'm not saying offensive linemen are soft or anything, but it just seems to me like the lack of physicality, and it's across the board. I don't know. Maybe it's just an instinctual thing. It seems like there's less and less contact, and you need contact to get ready for the year. You have to see it at full speed. It's like right now, the fastest I've ever driven is 90 miles an hour. If you put me in a NASCAR and was like, Jake, go 185 miles per hour, that's going to look like it's 800 miles per hour. I might as well be in an astronaut and get into a space shuttle and get shot to the sun. And I'm not talking about the fifth-year veterans and the older guys, but it just seems like the guys that are developing, it's slowing down development, and it always typically takes offense a little bit longer. And maybe that's not – I'm not saying that's 100% of the case, but I don't know, man. The more I watch, it's almost like the teams that don't play any of their good players in the preseason in the NFL, it typically takes a couple weeks for them to get going. It just seems like that to me. And you mix that with a bunch of new faces and new places. You got a bunch of new tackles in the league, and with injuries. I mean, it has been. I've noticed that too. I mean, it's some places have gotten better. I mean, hell, Auburn couldn't get much worse. It's a lot better than it was last year because it couldn't get much worse. Like I always say, they had more holes than Camp Green Lake. Like Shia LaBeouf and that little lizard kid and the kid that can fix everything.
Yeah, digging up holes. Yeah,
that's exactly right. That little ginger too.
Yeah, Jake. Let me go to this because you and I have been talking for quite a while now, a couple of years, talking Gamecocks football. So obviously you've kept your eye on things since Shane Beamer's gotten there. For example, there's a lot more chatter this year, and folks are starting to get really fed up with some of the things they're seeing defensively. When you look at South Carolina defensively, let's just say, for example, in that game against Tennessee, or even just what you've seen to this point, do you think Gamecock fans are justified for having angst regarding the defensive side of the football and going as far as saying there needs to be a change in leadership, say, at the defensive coordinator position? Is that a fair gripe amongst Gamecock fans at this point?
Well, we have a saying on Crain and Company: if you show me who you are enough, I'm going to believe you. Like at what point is it going to get better? Like I remember South Carolina used to fly around on defense and make people pay. Like I remember those days. Now, there hasn't been a ton of it in the lineage, but it just, at some point, it's got to get fixed. Like, you can only talk about it so much. Year one, trying to fix it, let's get it together. Year two, like, eventually you got to start seeing signs, at least, that progress is happening. Nobody's saying South Carolina's got to go out there and be the steel curtain. And look, you look at some of these recruits coming in, some of the edge players they got, I still think it's going to take a little time. But at the end of the day, like, you need to start seeing progress. Like, when somebody's going to start kicking somebody's ass a little bit? Like how long is this going to take? And I get that angst. Look, and I say this about Auburn too, even though they're in two different places. The standard should never be lowered, right? You need to live in reality. Like, for example, the Georgia game. In reality, I know they have way better players than Auburn, and Auburn fought their ass off to try and win that game, and they didn't at the end. And you want to expect to win. Doesn't make the players feel better. Doesn't make the coach feel better. But you see progress, right? You're like, okay, I can see it. That's tangible. No, we're not good enough at certain spots. But eventually down the road, you're in year two, the end of year two, and you're making the same mistakes over and over again, there should be angst. But the standard should never be lowered. The reality should always be accepted early. But at some point, Chris, next year, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed because the talking and hey, I'm not okay and you're not okay, but that's okay. Like, that's not going to work to sit in average Joes.
Jake, really quickly, because we've got a full slate of games to get into, is South Carolina at this point sitting at 2-3 heading in their bye week? Are they about, as a football team, where you expect them to be right now?
Yeah, it's going like exactly the way that I predicted it. It's projecting college football is really hard, but it's when you look at South Carolina, this wasn't like a hard formula, right? You talked about it. I talked about it. Offensive line, super skeptical hippo about it. Turns out we were right? You knew you had good skill players. Nicholas Harbor and them, you got to get him in there somehow. Like, at some point, like, the man needs help. Spencer Rattler, it's like, Kate Winslet, move your ass over on the door. Like, let somebody else get on the floating door, and maybe Leo's not going to freeze to death in the Atlantic Ocean or wherever the hell they were. Like, at some point, but it's defensively not great. We were worried about the linebacker position. Got injuries there, defensive line. Chris, it's working out almost exactly like we said it would, like during the offseason. And it's almost worse. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's almost worse that there's been times where South Carolina's played better, and who knows? Y'all, I think y'all will beat Florida. I really do believe that. But if you don't, then it could go downhill. It could go downhill.
Jake, as we turn our attention to the rest of the slate of games, let's go straight to the Plains. You already mentioned the Georgia-Auburn game. Georgia escapes, and we talked last week, man, weird things, crazy things happen on the Plains, and I think a lot of encouraging signs when you look at the Auburn perspective. Surely, I know you're not a man of moral victories, but you can see the foundation being laid. I think you also tweeted, get your shots in, kind of a Dion thing. Get your shots in now because this will be the worst team that Hugh Freeze trots out there. What did you see from both sides? Obviously, again, from the Auburn perspective, but I think for Georgia, I think Carson Beck grew up in front of our very eyes, and if you're going to win a national championship, like, that's a game. You got to win that kind of game at some point. That kind of game inevitably comes up.
Yeah, and he needs to be tested. You're going to have to be tested. You've got to pass the midterm to get to the final. Now, he hasn't passed the midterm yet, but he's getting close. Did really good on the quiz, the big quiz they just handed out at Auburn. I thought bouncing back in the third quarter, and look, he had tons of protection. I still got to see him when he's under fire and he's got to move a lot in the pocket. Auburn's deficient from a pass rush standpoint. He was able to stand back to all day. Auburn fought their guts out. They really did. And that game for Auburn, while there's no moral victories, being able to keep it close and show recruits, hey, listen, we are you away from beating Georgia. That's how close we are. And Brock Bowers was just better. Even a hurt Lad McConkey was just better. Their offensive line was just better, but I thought Auburn's game plan was good. There's a couple minor adjustments. I don't know how you double cover somebody and don't beat him up by the underneath guy. This isn't the NFL. There's no illegal contact. I mean, it turned into a power slap contest against Brock Bowers at the end of the game. You can have your 10, you can have your 15. But outside of that, I mean, Auburn had to pitch almost a perfect game as a coaching staff and as players, and that's so tough to do. And there is no moral victories, but it did show progress. I was proud of the fight. I thought Peyton Thorne showed toughness, and that's what we questioned after the A&M game, right? Like, are you going to stand in there and deliver the mail? I mean, not only did he do that, I thought he put some good balls in the air. He's never going to be an elite thrower of the ball, but I thought he ran the ball really hard. Auburn was able to run for over 200 yards against Georgia. But on the Georgia side, man, you got to win. You're growing while winning. That's a rarity. Like, the difference between Georgia and Michigan, we talked about this today. Michigan returns a bunch of players. Quarterback, offensive line, skill position, defense. Michigan is an old team. Georgia's having to replace a lot. Now, is Georgia that elite defense we've seen the past couple of years? No. Are they as good on offense as they have been the past couple of years? No. But in a year where there's no team that's sitting on top of the shiny golden hill that we're pointing at saying, all right, this is the best team in the country. Nobody else is close. Can anybody develop enough down the road to be able to touch them? They're going to grow and continue to put out the fires while winning. That builds confidence. And this is what I led the show off with today. The more people downplay Georgia, the more you are feeding into the brain scientist, the psychologist, the mind thought experimentalist, Kirby Smart, and what he wants to do. He doesn't have to manufacture adversity anymore. He's like, whoa, look, man, they got Washington number one. Washington. Like, Washington, they don't respect us. Man, Carson, I say you look like Sid from Ice Age and play like him too. Like, at the end of the day, he's going to use that, and you're going to look up in December, and there's going to be a Georgia team that's undefeated, that is not narcissistic or arrogant. They are pissed off, and everybody thinks they suck. That's the greatness of Kirby Smart, but the media just feeding them the rat poison. Just feed it to them. So look, I tell you, I'm impressed with Georgia, man. The two safeties they got, I mean, dude, Malachi Starks is a problem. Like, they don't have Jalen Carter. They don't have Jordan Davis yet. Those guys are continuing to get better. But Brock Bowers is probably the best player in college football, if we're going to be honest. And once Lad McConkey gets healthy, I mean, the great white witch, Haru, the great white ninja, whatever you want to call him. Like, goodness gracious, I'm telling you, Georgia's a problem. Like, they make fun of jokes all they want, but Georgia's a problem.
Jake, let's stick with the SEC West. Texas A&M takes down Arkansas. Ole Miss in a thrilling win over LSU. Bama beats Mississippi State in convincing fashion. What do you make of that side of the SEC, that division? I mean, it just seems – we talked about how wide open it was in preseason, but it's playing out that way. Like, of those teams I just mentioned, what do you make of just kind of what the SEC West is right now? Who would you say is in the driver's seat, if anyone?
Well, I mean, it's every time I see the SEC West, I just get the image of like the chick from Sound of Music on top of that hill, just like just spinning around because it's just so wide up. Like, you look at Alabama and A&M. The winner of this one has an inside track, right? But here's the problem. I think A&M still got to go 2 Ole Miss, 2 Tennessee, something like that, and then LSU. Right? I may be saying I may have a couple of those wrong, but Texas A&M, you win this one though. You get the tiebreaker over Bama. You still have no losses. And so if Bama beats LSU, everything else is even because Ole Miss still got to go to Georgia. Don't forget that. I know Ole Miss is hanging out right in there, but I don't see them going on the road and beating Georgia. I mean, who the hell knows at the end of the day, but that's a tough one. So if it comes down to Bama and A&M, and it could come down to this tiebreaker, the winner of this game goes, right? And A&M would play in the SEC championship game for the first time ever. Here's the matchup I can't wait for. Bama has struggled to run the ball. They really have. Outside of last week against Mississippi State, and look, Mississippi State's turning into a get-right game really quick for everybody else in the SEC. If Bama struggles to run the ball against A&M, and you get into the 3rd and 6s and aboves, and Jalen Milroe has to go get in a drop-back style system to beat A&M, I think DJ Durkin and them are going to rush for and spy him and make him go through his reads and say, if you want to predetermine where you're going to throw the ball, like you did against Texas, right? Because this is the best line they're going to face since Texas. This is just the truth. A&M's got some guys that can play up front. And everybody says, oh, well, Miami ripped him apart. Tyler Van Dyke and Jalen Milroe could not be more opposite of players. when it comes down to how they handle the drop back and how they can improvise. A&M has guys that while Jalen Milroe may be the best athlete, they can hem Jalen Milroe up and keep him from just escaping. He was just better than Mississippi State, right? He was just at birth, Mississippi State's defense was beat in that game when Jalen Milroe was born. And so the prophecy fulfills. But when I look at this game, if they stop the run, can Alabama get the 3rd and longs throwing the ball? If not, I think A&M can have enough success running the ball against Bama for Max Johnson to be able to operate in that play action game. But he's got to be smarter with the ball, and you can't turn it over. So the melding of the Kevin Steele, right, versus Bobby Petrino. Oh, God, I can't wait. We have that this weekend. That's like Professor X versus Magneto. And then on the other side, you got Brent Venables versus Steve Sarkisian. Good guy. It's a TED Talk out here.
Jake, how surprising are the defensive struggles of LSU to you? And also, what does the Ole Miss win say about Lane Kiffin and his program just a week after losing to Bama? And I feel like the narrative was, hey, he can't win the big game. I'd say that was a pretty damn big win in Oxford on Saturday night.
Huge. I mean, I think it shows you Lane has total control over those guys' preparation, and he has his finger on the pulse. I will say it's a lot better to be able to play. You like it a lot more when you can play another big-time opponent after losing a big-time game. Like, because you want – it helps narrow the focus, right? 24-hour rule. Hey, listen, we didn't play great at Bama, but we have LSU coming to town. We can right the ship, get back in the SEC West. And if we lose this one, we're out. We're out of 5,000. So I think it says a lot about Lane Kiffin's toughness, his team's toughness. I was shocked. I'm just shocked, Chris, because it's one thing to get beat on defense when you're busting coverages, right? Linebackers are overrunning things, cut it back, hit your head on the goalpost. It's another thing to just get your ass kicked physically. This is the 3rd time. Dry Visky. 3rd time we've seen LSU's defense get punked, okay? We saw it against Florida State in the second half. We saw it against Arkansas, especially in big moments, who isn't exactly the Globetrotters on offense, if you haven't noticed. And then we saw Ole Miss, who got pushed around by Tulane. Tulane is more physical than LSU on defense. And look at it up front. And Lane was able to get so deep in his bag because Lane is a run-to-pass play caller. That's a common misconception. Just like Josh Heupel is. Just like Lincoln Riley is. Just like Jeff Lebby is. This isn't the air raid offense. And he was able to get in his bag because they were blowing LSU's front 7 off of the ball, getting off on combos. It's shocking to see because I think of LSU and I think of, oh my God, what are those things getting off the bus? Like, where's the swagger of LSU where it's just, like they walk out in the field and you got to like put your hands over their kids' eyes, like on when they're running gap scheme plays. It's just so violent. Like it's weird to see, man. And Matt House, to me, it's a lack of fear. It's a lack of fear of messing up. Fear of failure is a real thing. You don't want to be consumed by it, but you need it. Like the worst part about making a bad play as a player, like wasn't just that you you screwed up in the game, but now I got to go watch it with all my best friends and teammates who bleed and die for this like I do the next day in film. Like and I let my coaches down. I let effort. We're talking about physicality, not mental stuff, physicality. Getting blown off the ball. It's not like you're weak. Mekhi Wingo isn't weak. Mason Smith isn't weak. LSU lift weights too. They just don't have that dog in them on defense. And it needs to get fixed because you're still in the hunt. But if it doesn't get fixed now, I mean, you go to Bama, like I mean, they're probably going to kill Auburn at home. But, whatever. It's going to take time. I don't know. It's just weird to see, Chris, like watching your mom kiss another man. It's like, not your dad. Like, oh, no, you snuck in the mall in the food court. You're over there making out with some dude that works at Scrappy Coco's or whatever.
Hey, and you mentioned those tests for LSU and getting them fixed. I mean, it comes this week, right? Going on the road to Como facing a red-hot Mizzou team. Both Mizzou and Kentucky. I know we didn't really mention Kentucky, Florida, so if you want to expand on that one. I mean, I don't know if Gainesville, if they've given Ray Davis the key to the city yet or what, but I think he owns the University of Florida at this point. But I wanted to get to the point. Both those teams are 5-0, Mizzou and Kentucky. Who you buying more stock in right now?
Man, here's my thing with Kentucky. I don't trust Devin Leary. Like Devin Leary didn't have to do anything in that game, like except get the handoff and hand it to Ray Davis. That game was won exactly like Mark Stoops wants to win games. Mm-hmm. Run the ball, hit a couple play action passes.
Vintage Kentucky.
Stop the run. Boom. Easy. Yeah. Boom. I swam across from the other side of the island. There were times where they were watching. I was watching. I mean, they were running counter, and both pullers, like there was nobody in the hole. They just kept on going. Ray Davis just running. It's one thing to like break a couple tackles, spin a guy, make a safety miss, hurdle him, go for 70 yards. Like, wow, it's amazing. Now, there were times he wasn't touched. Like, that's almost hard to do. Like, especially when you come out in like 11 personnel or 12 personnel. And he's a really good running back. Reminds me of Ray Rice a little bit. But Kentucky beat Florida the way Florida beat Tennessee. Just lined it up and ran it down their throat and didn't let the other team run the ball. So kudos to Kentucky. I do believe in Missouri a little bit more. Because Brady Cook, and I said this all offseason, and there's like, oh, it's a quarterback battle in Missouri and all this stuff. If you actually watched Missouri last year, Brady Cook was really good outside of like 2 or 3 decisions a game where he would get on the move and try and improvise and play a game of whose line is it anyway, and something bad would happen. It's like if he could eliminate just those couple mistakes, not that you're not going to make a mistake here and there, but if he could eliminate a couple of them with Luther Burden coming back. I had an SEC assistant text me before the beginning of the season. Say, I'm telling you right now, Missouri may have the most underrated defense in the SEC. It's like they don't have any like stars that like Nick Bolton that are going to jump off at you, but they're old and they're solid and they know where they're supposed to be. I'm buying Missouri over Kentucky right now, and I like the Schrader kid, but Luther Burden, good God, alien, 100%. You want disclosure, all that stuff, like it just alien. Luther Burden. In Missouri.
On that note, Jake, we've touched on most of the games on this slate this upcoming weekend. Georgia with a night game at home against Kentucky, and Kentucky's played Georgia tough last couple of years. Do you think the Cats can go in and pull the upset? And for Georgia, again, it's just another test, man. I mean, another SEC team looking to knock them off. What are you most excited to see? This is a good weekend of football. I mean, you got the LSU-Mizzou game in the noon slot, Bama A&M in the 3:30, and then this one in the 7 o'clock. But I'm really interested to see how Georgia follows up that Auburn performance, and can Kentucky as well. Can they bring enough physicality to take down Georgia? Because I think that's what it's going to take, along with, like you mentioned, a Devin Leary finally emerging and becoming the guy they thought he was going to be.
Yeah, here's the thing. If you're Kentucky, you really wish Auburn didn't run for 200 yards against Georgia. You really wish just Peyton Thorne, like, through the air was, figured it out, just, like, lit them up. Because the whole week, Kirby Smart's going to be running around with that bullhorn screaming about stopping the run. Because that's what Kentucky is, right? So you're going to get the emphasis of Georgia this week, stopping the run, and Ray Davis, but he just went for, 3 bills against Florida, which is hard to do against Florida International, let alone the University of Florida. There's something about Georgia surviving that next week you come out and just play well. Like you almost playing a little bit freer. It's like, you're more honed in, but you're playing free. I think Devin Leary, I don't trust him under pressure. He puts a lot of balls in harm's way. I think this is a game where Malachi Starks runs a pick back for a touchdown. I think Georgia stops the run this weekend. They put Kentucky in a bind. That thing's getting bet down really quickly. That started off at 17.5. It was down to 14.5 the last time I saw it. I'm just going to let it cook. Just let it keep on going down and keep on going down and keep on going down. Because there's one quarterback in Power 5 that averages 20 completions, 60% completion percentage, and has at least 250 passing yards in every game. And that's Carson Beck. And a lot of that is because that offensive line's nice. Not that Kentucky's defense is bad, but Georgia has the top 3 offensive line in the country, I'm just telling you.
Jake, last thing before I get you out of here, and again, I appreciate you being gracious with your time and flexible this week. South Carolina, again, back to them, entering the bye week. You've been in this game. You've been on a coaching staff. You've been around a group of players, a team, what have you. Just talk about what are the advantages, what are the benefits, what positive can come for South Carolina in this bye week, because after that, obviously, again, you've got the Gators at home. You go to Mizzou, you go to A&M, then you close out the stretch, the 4-game home stretch into the season that includes Kentucky, Clemson. But for South Carolina, what good can come out of this bye week for them outside of the obvious, I'd say, of resting and getting healthy?
Yeah. Speaking about flexible, though, I can do something that, like, I'm double jointing my hands. I've never seen anybody else that can do this.
I do not think
so. If anybody else can do that, please, good luck. Show it to me. Tag me on Twitter. But bye week. obviously health, right? You get a chance to get some guys healthy. You get a weekend of being able to not have, that beating on your body, even if it's gets an FCS team or something. But like the thing that sucks is that while that's nice, you want to be able to get back out there, right? You want to make up for it. You want to be able to say, listen, that game against Tennessee, we just didn't play well like we did the week before, whatever. And you want to get back out there and get that winning taste. But you get a chance to, you get a little more tape on everybody else. You get another week of tendencies. And look, you look at a team like Florida, who I believe, is Florida off this weekend as well?
They got Vandy. So
okay, so Florida's off this weekend. I told you,
hey, that's a revenge. Hey, listen, that's a revenge game for the Gators, though. Revenge game.
Yeah,
after last year.
This isn't a trigonometry exam or an architectural convention. But no, look, it's one of those things where you do get a chance to put in some more stuff offensively. You self-scout right to this point. You have almost half a year's worth of information. You're able to self-scout yourself, maybe try and give that offensive line a little bit more of an advantage by pitching backwards, doing some things you haven't done. So yeah, there are some advantages, but deep down as a competitor, you want to get back in there, man. You want to go play another one. You want to get that win under your belt, but bye weeks are good. Bye weeks. What does he say on Dumb and Dumber? He's like, pills are good. Pills are good. Bye weeks are good. They're good.
On that note, Jake, South Carolina, since 2009, they're 14-2 coming off a bye week. So we'll see if that stat holds up true going into next weekend against the Florida Gators at Willie B, which we now know will be a 3:30 kickoff on the SEC Network.
Hey,
Jake Crain, Crain and Company.
Can I say something, though? Man, why look, why does Auburn always play Georgia at 2:30 in the afternoon at home, but always have to play LSU at night? Like, what's going on? This always Chris, this always happens. At this point, it's you might as well just automatically lock it in. I'm so ready for this new schedule, bro. I'm so ready for it. I don't get it. It's like a head coach I worked for, before I got in Division I said, I like playing home games at night because by then myself and the fans are too drunk to be nervous anymore.
Hey, Georgia's finally getting night games. I think they like what's going on. They're finally getting some prime time in Athens. So,
John Edward, I am complaining about game times. All right, I am. Since I was like 8.
I love it. Yeah.
All right,
Jake Crain of Crain and Company, my friend. It's always a pleasure, my man. We'll do it again next week. I appreciate you.
Sounds good, brother. Holler at you.
Yeah, man. We'll talk soon.
See you.
Great stuff, guys, and a great way to end today's show with our good friend Jake Crain of Crain and Company. Guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Really quick, you heard that correctly earlier in the show. There will be no TDC Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday because, of course, it is the bye week. There is no South Carolina football to break down. No reason to do position unit comparisons, storylines, predictions, all that good stuff. So tomorrow, we will jam everything in regards to our drive around the SEC. I'll lock in my SEC pick'em. We'll talk a little gambling picks, all that good stuff. All the stuff we normally get in, we'll talk tomorrow, get all that content in, but no TDC Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. So you guys will be able to enjoy the bye week, rest, recoup, watch some SEC football. Obviously, guys, still be on social media, all that good stuff, posting graphics. You know how we do, but a couple of days we will not be rocking the live show. But be sure in the meantime, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we go live, when we drop new video content as well. Also, hit the subscribe button on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. The podcast is dropping daily there. Guys, outside of that, that's going to do it off me. Appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Y'all have a great rest of your Monday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.